I'm Andy Orr. I'm at the Open Source Convention, and I'm talking here with Jono Bacon, a famous community manager, wrote a book for O'Reilly on that. So we just had a Community Leadership Summit here, our annual summit. Number 9, was it?
9.
Yes.
I can't believe it's been 9 years. We're getting old, Andy.
Right. And I noticed in the first couple of Community Leadership Summit, there was actually no job description called community manager.
Yeah.
Right, and now a lot of community managers, right?
Yeah.
And even managers of community managers. Right?
Yeah.
So tell me what came out as new and interesting this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because with every Community Leadership Summit, we always have a set of very common topics that people tend to get into, and that's usually around things such as diversity and metrics and software collaboration and things like that. I think it was largely a lot of the same this year, a lot of the common themes. I think there was more and more of a focus on like foundations and how people can legally organize themselves to support communities. But more and more discussion around what you touch on, around what it is to be a community manager or a developer relations person or something along those lines, and how you interface with other parts of the business and things such as that. You know, over the years, I think we've seen the professionalization of this work becoming a more common component, and it's not just, you know, the typical things that you do to build a community, but it's like, how do you exist in an ecosystem with other roles, with product, with engineering, with different leadership levels and things like that. So.
Yes, a couple of the speakers talked about working for different groups, and
Right.
it seemed like no company knew exactly where to put community management.
Yeah, I think it's I'm a consultant. I work with companies around building communities, and everyone's different. You know, I think we're now also starting to see the delineation between different types of work. So I think historically it was community manager, and everybody kind of fell into that bucket. But now I think we're seeing more directors of community who maybe are a bit more strategic in the way that they approach things. And then you've got developer relations people, and you've got developer evangelists. And I think we're starting to see the specialisms forming, and it's good in my mind, because if you've only got one bucket, you've only got community managers, and you've got, you know, anything from very, very junior, people who are very new at this, or people who specialize heavily in one area, such as developer relations. And then you've also got really high-level, kind of more executive, like strategic thinkers. It's difficult to kind of get a good balance. So now I think it's just the professionalization of it. So.
Yeah, in addition to complaining that they keep getting moved around in companies, some of the community managers also said that the company didn't understand what they had. We like to call it soft skills, which is not a very nice way to put it. But I guess if you're saying that the jobs are getting better defined, that's a good sign, because the companies know what they want.
I'd like to think so. This is one of the things where I think it really varies a lot. Like, one of the problems that I've seen, and this is a common part of the work that I do with companies, is you'll get, you know, a CEO or a CIO or a CTO or someone like that will identify the value of building a community. And what they'll do is they'll hire someone, a community manager will come in, so the kind of person who will go to CLS. That person will come in and they'll start doing the things that community managers do. They'll start blogging and doing social media and writing documentation and managing GitHub repos and whatever else. A lot of that work is super valuable, but maybe it doesn't then translate into the value that the executive wants to see. And sometimes you see this impasse where the community manager is doing great stuff, but it's not translating, and the exec doesn't know how to translate back to that layer, and either that person, that community manager, either gets frustrated and leaves, or they get fired. And you know, I still think I think the science, the art and science of community management is becoming more and more formed at the practitioner's level, but I still think it's a bit of a mystery at the executive level for how to handle these folks. Like, the common debate was, do they live in marketing or engineering, as an example. And you know, there's a bit of a theme in many community managers where they refuse to work in marketing. And to me, it's a bit of a misnomer, because there are some incredible marketing departments out there. It's more about what kind of marketing department you put into. And you can be put into an engineering department and it doesn't make sense. So I think it's very difficult to have hard and fast rules in this area, because it's just vastly different. Even just within open source, it's vastly different. But then if you're talking about financial services and consumer products and security, then it gets even more complicated.
So what's the wrong type of marketing department? Would that be a department that just is putting out a one-directional marketing kind of thing?
Right. Well, the way I tend to think of it is marketing primarily is a broadcast mechanism. So it's, marketing owns the messages, right? So you have a product or a service. You have something like OSCON, right? We're at OSCON. And OSCON has got some marketing messages that will want to be attached to that. Like, it's a great conference. It's been around for 20 years. It attracts the best of breed talent, all that kind of stuff. To me, a marketeer will craft those messages and then broadcast those messages out through advertising, social media, content, video, whatever else. But marketing is historically not a particularly interactive medium. And community management is very much an interactive medium, I think. So, community manager looks at a good one, in my mind, looks at the holistic life cycle from how do you bring those people in to how do you onboard them, how do you incentivize them, how do you keep them interested. Marketeers that don't typically solve those kinds of problems. So if you get that kind of marketing, which is more broadcast-based, or marketers don't like it when I say this, traditional, then I think community managers can rub up against them the wrong way. But I think if you've got a marketeer who is used to a more interactive way of marketing, they're used to doing webinars and events, and they've run campaigns, and they've done, for example, A/B testing with users and consumers to provide input on how they improve, then I think it's a much better fit. So if you only are looking at a broadcaster marketeer, I'd tread carefully, unless it's the other way around.
Yeah. We also mentioned soft skills before and how we don't tend to like that term. It's dismissive. So someone at the conference said we could call them, instead of soft skills, essential skills.
Right.
People skills being essential, and also that these skills will last your whole career, unlike knowledge of Java or Ruby or something that may last just a few years.
Right. Yeah, I heard that. I kind of agree and disagree with that statement in some ways. I think it's, to me there's like a baseline set of people-related skills that I think it's healthy for us all to have. Like, for example, again, to come to a conference and to be able to have good conversations, to be respectful and include people in what you're doing, and to be proactive and productive in the way you do it. I think those kinds of things are essential. I don't think having the level of quote-unquote soft skills to be a community manager is essential. I don't think people necessarily need to go into that level of depth. But I'm also just mindful as well that, like, to me, I've always been a people person. It's never really been a struggle for me. But I know for a lot of people it's really hard to engage, like particularly, folks who aren't necessarily thrust into an environment like this very often. Like I've got a friend here actually, and the only conference he goes to is this one, and he goes every 2 or 3 years. And when he gets here, he feels very uncomfortable, and he's a pretty personable human being. So I think sometimes it's easy to assume that soft skills are actually relatively easy to switch on, but I think for some folks it's quite difficult. So the practice and the training there is helpful.
We could probably all benefit.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I always say this, but thank you for being my editor again. I know it was 10 years ago, but Andy did a great job.
Thank you.
Turning my raw material into something that people like to read. But no, I think it's a very exciting time for all of this. More and more companies and organizations are seeing the value of people collaborating together, and I think that we're, events like the Community Leadership Summit or OSCON or the Open Source Summit, whatever, they all help us to understand more and more about how that works and to make it a little bit more predictable and repeatable. So just when I think I've got a handle on it, I realize there's so much more to learn. And the more we all do this, the better it gets. So.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.